going.
We're going.
We're grooving.
Welcome to Behavioral Grooves. My name is Kurt Nelson.
And I'm Tim Houlihan. This is the podcast where we discuss why we do what we do. And in this episode, we're doing a grooving session on our favorite podcast episodes.
Episodes?
Yeah, episodes. Because too many people, in our estimation, at least, I'm pretty sure that we both share this, like make these recommendations like, oh, you should read this book. Like, oh man, that's 323 pages. I don't have time to read that.
You can't read 323 pages?
Never. I've never read that. Or like, you should go to Malaysia. Like, what? Like, these are hard things to do. When
Malaysia's a wonderful country.
It is.
Kuala Lumpur is a great city. It's great.
It's a cool
I
place.
love visiting there. So
yeah, me too.
All right. Anyway, you get to your point.
But it can just be overwhelming. So we're picking not just podcasts. We're picking specific episodes that we think that you, our listeners, would enjoy.
So we're not asking listeners to go and watch the entire Game of Thrones 8 seasons. We're saying, this is the episode that you should watch.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
All right. Good.
Exactly.
Good.
That's it. Yeah.
Well, first off, this is the second episode in 2020.
Yeah.
A new year, a new decade.
And the first time that we've been in the studio for like a month.
I know. I've been traveling. You've been traveling. So
you've been traveling a long way, though.
Well, that's what happens.
Yeah.
You go to Africa and you gotta fly a long way. So you might as well spend a long time over there, right?
Yeah. So that is important. That this is kind of a regeneration for us.
Yeah. So 2020,
getting ready for 2020.
2020. This is our first grooving session in 2020. This is the year that Behavioral Grooves is just gonna take it to the next level, right?
We're breaking out this year.
The decade of Behavioral Grooves.
We've got some super cool plans for this year.
We do.
Yeah.
One of those plans is that we're actually expanding kind of this network of podcasts that we're actually doing, and we're going to start Weekly Grooves, which is a totally different podcast, totally different format,
right.
And you and I are going to be grooving every week on a topic and bringing in some current articles and various different information.
Yeah,
on that.
like using a behavioral lens or applying a behavioral lens to things that are topical.
Yeah, business in particular, but
yes.
Topical things and that. So that should be coming out in a few weeks. Knock on wood. Right?
Yes.
There we go. We'll keep that going.
Yes, it was.
But yeah, so 2020 is a big year, and so we hope that you listeners will enjoy what we have planned, because I think it's going to be really cool.
Yeah, and to help us make 2020 our breakout year, it would really help if listeners would give us a quick rating. It only takes like 23 seconds to go down to the bottom of the app and just rate us.
Just give us 5 stars or 4 stars.
Bottle of Bing, you're back into the app, everything's good. Or I think it takes like less than a minute, like 57 seconds or so, to actually just write a quick review.
You've done some research on this.
I've done a little math on it.
23 seconds and the 58.
It's my Kiki brain.
Oh, well, and if you don't have time to go and leave a review or write something nice, at least just share this with a friend or family member that you think would have it be interesting. Talk about it. It's that word of mouth thing. Put us out on social media. Say, hey, this was a great episode, and you can bring specific episodes in.
Yes, it
All
was
right.
a great episode. Not just Don't tell people just to load this up and start listening.
Oh, just listen to Behavioral Grooves. No, tell them about the Rory Sutherland episode or the Andy Dukes one, or whichever one you like.
Exactly.
Or maybe the one about podcasts, because that's what we're going to talk about today.
So let's get started with podcast episodes. Kurt, what are some of your favorite? And I don't know if we've got these actually ranked, but what are some of your favorite podcast episodes that you listened to in 2019?
So I am starting off with Laurie Santos' Happiness Lab.
Bueno.
Right? And I know you have one of these episodes too. It's a different one, thankfully. Mm-hmm. But it was her second one. It was The Unhappy Millionaire. And the episode explores how we really don't understand what makes us happy. It has Dan Gilbert coming in. But I mean, she starts off, all of hers kind of start off with the story, right? And she brings in the story of this gentleman who I love how she does it, because she starts off with, without saying what the event was, but talks about how he was this happy guy with a family, and then this event happened, and then he changed, and his wife divorced him, and his kids, he got disfranchised from his kids, and he ended up committing suicide. And what we find out is that event was that he won the Texas lottery.
Right.
And then his life went to hell. And most people go, well, if I won the lottery, life would be great. But we don't really understand all of those factors that go into it. And so I love this just from that perspective of saying, all right, it's the happiness lab. And, I think really pointing out that we don't have a really good grasp of what makes us happy. And I listened to it, and then we were driving up to the cabin over the summer, and I made my kids listen to it in the car, and we had a conversation about it. You
forced them to listen to this.
Because we were saying, it's one of those things. They're 13 and 9 at the time, and, they think they know what makes them happy, but a lot of these things like, oh, if I just was rich, I'd be happy. And I'm going, that's not how this works.
So did you straighten them out?
I doubt it. They're 13 and 9. So they didn't listen to me or the podcast. But, anyway, hopefully somewhere in the recesses of their brain, something stuck.
Well, speaking of Laurie Santos, she's the one that developed the G.I. Joe fallacy.
Which we love.
Knowing is not even close to half the battle. So good luck on continuing that story, Dad.
All right. So you have a Laurie Santos.
I do. In fact, it was my number one as well. I thought that the episode called Make 'Em Laugh, it was about canned laughter. It was about how TV shows that use canned laughter actually get, first of all, people like them more than when there's no laugh track. And even when people know it's a canned laugh track and they say, oh, yeah, that's not real. Somebody put that in afterwards. They still like it better than without the laugh track.
Like all the canned laughter that we use in the show. Because it's all canned. We are just the most straight-laced two guys that you could ever think, and we have to add in the fake laughter.
I actually went out and bought some sound effects for canned laughter just so that we can have it just in case.
We might have to add some in just to showcase what this is.
I think so.
But that was a good. I listened to that too. That was a good episode. You talked about it right afterwards. So.
I did. And something else I want to say about Laurie's happiness lab is that the production is great. And, we've had the chance to meet Laurie, and she is such an authentic and cool person. She's really a terrific, the soul, if you will. Mm-hmm. And this comes through. Her authenticity really comes through in the podcast. And that's one of the things I really like about her approach.
Also, if you are interested in happiness and kind of want to learn more about it, her happiness class is on Coursera.
Yeah, that's right. She took her Yale course and kind of modified it and put it on Coursera.
Yeah, so it's free. So you can go out there and you can learn. It's great. I've only gotten through the first two classes of it, but I have it.
Were the first two good?
Yeah, they were really good.
Good. Okay. Good place to start then. First two.
Well, and I'm going to keep going and talking about happiness. I have a theme here. A couple different themes that come through in the ones that I have. And so I am picking as my second episode is Shane Parrish's The Knowledge Project is the podcast, which is a great podcast, by the way. But his is actually really recent. It was with Neil Pershika, and it was about happy habits. And what was fascinating about this for me is, again, Shane is a really good interviewer.
Yeah.
He's pretty, straight-laced and calm. He would use some canned laughter. He could use some canned laughter.
He could.
But he asks really insightful questions, and he brings some really insightful thoughts into this. And so the conversation that these two have, because they're both from Canada. So they they start talking about some things, but they bring this real human touch to this topic, and they talk about some anti-fragility pieces and some resilience aspects, and they talk about their kids and how they're trying to, bring their kids up, and how do we make the kids as best they can. And Neil talks about, how he was raised and some factors that go back to, he is of Indian descent and his, arranged marriage of his parents and different things. And so it's fascinating to listen to it. And I just thought it was really insightful and really well done.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. I want to stick with female podcasters on this, because my number 2 is the podcast is Choiceology. Yeah,
we know.
Yeah, exactly. And the host is Katie Milkman, and we adore her. Right?
Yes,
you know, she was a great guest on our show. But Katie's Choiceology is a terrifically well produced and well researched. But I want to call specific attention to the episode called "Take a Deal." Take the Deal, where she gets to talk, and it's about decision making. Mm-hmm. And she interviews Danny Kahneman, Colin Kammerer, and Louise Green. And it's like, holy Hannah, to have all 3 of them, to get their combined wisdom. A Nobel laureate first, Colin Kammerer, who is an all-star in my book because his work goes back, almost 30 years, with just tremendous work in economics and psychology. And Louise Green, to have all 3 of those guys, contribute to this was just fabulous on how to make better decisions.
Well, they talked about flawed decision making. Right?
Yes.
Which they could have just interviewed us.
Actually, could have just interviewed me and filled an hour with that. I've got all kinds of flaws.
We got lots of flaws here. But no, it was a great conversation.
Yeah.
I listened to it as well.
Yeah.
And I know you were drooling over it.
Well, I was, just because you get that star power thing going. It's pretty terrific. Okay, what's your next one?
All right, so I'm sticking. So we talked about with Shane Parrish and Neil talking about happiness, but then they brought in this anti-fragility and resilience piece, and then I'm going back on that because the next one is the science of success with Matt Bodnar.
Oh yeah,
and he did an interview with Dr. Jonathan Haidt, right?
Yeah,
and the 3 dangerous ideas that are putting our society at risk, and so. Jonathan has just written a book, The Coddling of America, and they talked about that. But really, it's about this idea that we are overprotecting our kids. We're not allowing them the opportunity to have failure or to having kids push each other in the playground and solve it on their own. We don't allow that to even happen anymore. Right. And so we don't understand how to solve through these problems. And so then once you get to be an adult and you enter into the real world, it's like life is overwhelming. And they talk about some of the really sad statistics that are out there with suicides, increasing suicides, and a variety of other things. But, I'll put a positive spin on this is they put some ideas out there about what you can do about it too.
Beyond just the ideas, I love how Jonathan in that episode talks about his own kids.
Yes.
Like he's willing to say, this is how I'm actually dealing with my own children.
Which is why I go back to the thing with Shane Parrish and this episode. That's what I think makes these so powerful, because they bring these personal stories in, which really highlight these facts that just all of a sudden take on a new meaning, because you're going, oh, I see how this is really impacting you. It's not just this academic, research that you're doing. This is personal.
Right. That goes for Katie Milkman and Laurie Santos as well, of course. Okay, I want to switch over to something that's not very personal, a podcast called Big Brains, and it's produced by, the host is Paul Rand, and it's produced out of the University of Chicago.
It's great podcast.
It's a terrific podcast. My favorite episode that I want people to pay attention to first is Why Talking to Strangers Will Make You Happier.
No, it won't. It's scary. So, I don't want to talk to stranger danger.
Well, so Nick Epley is at the University of Chicago. He's done a ton of research on this whole idea of being in public situations, social situations, and then just opening up and getting outside of our shell, and actually how much happier we are when we do that, especially in places like elevators, buses, trains, waiting in long queues for taxis, things like that. How valuable it can be just to talk to other people.
But instead we sit down and we look at our phones, right? We do the stink blare and
everyone predicts, oh no, I'll be happier if you just leave me the hell alone.
What was we were at the conference where they talked about the study where they had the bracelets, the red and green bracelets at lunchtime, and they did the experiment of, if I want to talk, I put on green, if I don't, I put on the red. And the idea that sometimes we just need cues to start these conversations, because a lot of the reason that people don't start is like, well, they don't want to talk to me, right? You're sitting on a plane and the person next to you, like I sat next to a gentleman for 18 hours flying from Ethiopia to Chicago. We landed in Dublin, spent an hour on the ground there, and I said a total of 2 sentences to the guy. 18 hours right next to this guy. 2 guys, actually, that I didn't even say a word to the guy in the window seat.
And that was it.
And that was it. And that's I look at this and I say, I should have had a conversation. I mean, even if it was a short conversation,
I go back to our buddy Sharon Ariely that we met at a conference, and we see her at conferences all the time. But she's with a company called Next Step, and they help with these cues. They're the ones that came up with this fabulous idea of when you're in a conference, everybody adopt a code word, so that if there's 3 people talking or 2 people talking, and you want to get in on that conversation, you can just walk up and say, banana tree, or whatever the code word is, right? And,
I know.
And you get in. I love that. I absolutely love those kinds of tools. And I have adopted talking to people in all these situations, and I find I like my life better.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah. So,
all right.
Okay, what's your next one? All
right, I'm going totally off I'm taking a right turn instead of keeping going straight here, because I'm going with a podcast that I came across. Actually, I believe I came across it through The Science of Success, because I think Matt Bodnar interviewed Matt Wolf and Joe Fier of the Hustle and Flowchart podcast.
Yeah.
And so I listened to that. So very different. These guys are content marketing background, and they do a business, they do a podcast about podcasts and how to monetize your podcast and how to grow your listeners and various different things. And so for me, this is part of our 2020 stuff, is where like I'm trying to learn, like how do we get more people to listen? How do we actually break even on this instead of losing lots of money every year? So it's one of those aspects, and they do, again, what I like is they're irrelevant. They are
irreverent.
Irreverent.
Yeah. I think they are.
That's my booba mind. Going mispronouncing things and doing things, but they're irreverent, and but they have fun. But again, they talk about their own experiences, and they bring these personal stories in, and even the people that they're interviewing, they don't just get into, so how do you use Facebook ads? They talk about, well, tell us a little bit about your history and doing that. So you get this background on the people that they're interviewing, but then themselves. And the episode I want is just their therapy session. So it's like a grooving session.
Right.
It's like there's lots of similarities between them and us, but they do these therapy sessions where they just kind of talk. And so therapy session number 153, where they talk about TNC, Podfest, selling shirts, and affiliate marketing. And they're sitting out in a park, and they've just come off of like a week of doing back-to-back 2 conferences, and they just rip, and they just got
do a therapy session.
Yeah, they do a therapy session. Yeah. So it's a really good intro, and they have some really good insights, and the guests that they have are pretty amazing in some of the work that they do. So it's really good. Really, if you're starting a podcast or thinking about starting a podcast, I would listen to them.
Just one more comment on that from me. When they engage somebody who is willing to sort of talk about things on a more personal level, it's much more interesting than the guests that they have that are like, they're just kind of promoting themselves or promoting their stuff. It's like, yeah, I get it. I mean, and there can be good content there, but they actually do a good job of bringing in the personal side as well.
So here's a comment actually Shane Parrish was talking about at one time. He was talking about reading books and the idea of how do you retain more information when you read and different things. He has a whole process and different thing on that. But one thing that I remember is he talks about, look, if you start reading a book and it doesn't interest you, just stop. Don't continue reading it, right? You have a limited amount of time and energy and focus. Mm-hmm. And I believe the same thing with podcasts. So in their case, exactly. Yeah. There are podcasts that I start to listen to and I just go, what?
It doesn't work.
nope, this is not it. And so I don't listen to it. I skip to the next one, and I will selectively pick. They have a ton of podcasts out there, so you can pick a lot.
My next one is recorded by a guy named John Donvan, and he moderates discussions, actually debates between two teams, and the podcast is called Intelligence Squared U.S. Debates. And he's a fabulous moderator, and he brings up really interesting topics and gets experts on both sides of the issue to argue their positions. And the one that I thought was really one of the most interesting of 2019 was, is social media good for democracy? Yeah, really fascinating. And so when you have experts arguing on both sides, the issues, so they're not arguing petty little crap, they're actually arguing the issues. It was so fascinating to think about how we think about social media and the impact that social media can have on democracy in both positive and negative ways. So when it comes to really thinking deeply about something, I like this. I like John Donvan's approach with this Intelligence Squared U.S. Debates because it helps inform me of lots of different and cogent arguments.
Well, I love the idea of having both sides presented.
Right.
Which part of the social media aspect, in my belief, is that we tend to get, because of the algorithms and the way that they work, we tend to see more things to keep us engaged that just pull us down our own little rabbit hole of ideas. And so we get sucked into our own bubble, and we don't hear the cohesive ideas from the other alternative viewpoint.
Big damn echo chambers, basically.
We hear the negative aspects or the things like, oh, they're idiots and different things, right?
Right.
Those are the pieces we hear. We don't hear well, why do they actually believe that? And there's, most of the time, there's some rational thought on both sides, right? And
going back to Jonathan Haidt,
right?
Actually,
exactly, yeah.
The Righteous Mind.
Yeah. Okay. Well, all right. So I'm skipping ahead from my list because just on this, I'm going to go to Big Think Again, hosted by Jason Gotts. And he interviewed Christopher Wiley, and they talked about Cambridge Analytica, the cognitive separation of America.
Yeah, you loved this, didn't you?
It scared the shit out of me. And again, talking social media we've talked about Cambridge Analytica on the episode before, and we've talked a little bit about some of the background and how they use behavioral science and different things. Well, Christopher Wiley was one of he came in, was a data scientist, and kind of set up a lot of the work that Cambridge Analytica did. He kind of got pulled into this thing and various different things. But it's the story of that. And actually, that led me, I think I'd already bought the book Mindfuck by Christopher Wiley, but it made me really want to read it. And I just read it. And again, scares the shit out of me. Yeah. But it's really important, I think, for people to hear this and to understand this and to understand how what we're being presented in social media is manipulating us, and how it is actually using behavioral science to target, at some of our underlying fears and various different things, and the impact that has. And again, it's not necessarily this widespread, we're covering all 70 million people, but because of the way that they can target with AI and data analytics.
It doesn't have to be 70 million people.
All you need to do is influence a few people. You find enough people, that hold a belief, and then how you spin that and twist that. And when you get unethical and what I would consider immoral actors who are in charge of these organizations that are out either for just a buck or because they're actually trying to change society. Yeah. And they don't care about the means of doing that. They just care about the ends. It was scary.
We're going to have some guests in 2020 that speak to that. Yeah. I think that should be a priority.
It should be. I would love to get Christopher Wiley on. Yeah. So if anybody knows him or has a contact, let us know, because we'd love to have that conversation. Yeah. All right.
I'm going to do a right turn. Or maybe
why don't you go left?
I'm going to go left.
Okay.
I'm going to go left. I want to introduce the David Gilmour podcast.
From Pink Floyd?
Pink Floyd, the guitarist from Pink Floyd. Yes. Okay. So David is amazingly talented guy, right? From my perspective. He's done a lot of great recording, but he has his own podcast. It's called the David Gilmour Podcast. And my favorite episode is the one called The Fender Stratocaster serial number 0001. So that means it's the very first Fender Stratocaster, which is, basically the de facto rock and roll guitar. Right? so the whole rock, all of rock and roll was built on the Fender Stratocaster.
Really? All of it.
Well, okay. So some people would argue the Les Paul had something to do with it, but that's kind of whatever. But this magical, ethereal, unbelievable, mythical guitar actually exists, and David Gilmour owns it.
Oh,
and so he gets to talk about owning number one, the very first Fender Stratocaster made by Leo Fender.
Well, that's cool.
And it's just really fun. It's not a very long podcast, and if you have any interest in music, I just highly recommend it.
Does Roger Waters have a podcast?
No, thank God. It would be so dark and gloomy.
Although I have to say, I like Roger Waters' songs
you like all
better
that dark
than
shit.
David Gilmour's songs mostly, on average. Not saying anyway, all right. But we digress.
Okay, what's next?
All right, so I got to go back up here. I think this podcast is actually pod faded, which means that they're no longer producing them.
Yeah.
But it was Smart Drugs Smart with the host Jesse Lawler, and this podcast actually had a big impact on my life because it introduced me to this concept called aphantasia. Which I think we might have talked a little bit about it, but it was aphantasia with Dr. Joel Pearson.
Yeah.
And aphantasia is this condition that 2 to 3% of the population, they believe, has, where that mind's eye that most people have when you close your eyes or you think about something and you picture something in your mind, there's a certain percentage of the population, 2 to 3%, that don't do that. And I've realized that that's me. So I have aphantasia, and so if you just ask me, close your eyes and imagine an apple or anything, a picture of a beach or anything, when I close my eyes, I see black. I do not see anything else. So, which leads to a whole number of interesting things.
How can you be such a successful podcaster without that ability?
Well, because I can still talk, and I make shit up, so it's all good.
Thank God for that. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that was a very insightful one.
Okay. The next one is a favorite of both of ours, a podcast called You Are Not So Smart, hosted by David McCraney.
I just think they're talking to me.
I thought it was written for me.
Oh no, they're talking about me. You're not so smart.
That must be the sounds like that's the spotlight effect.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, but David McCraney's podcast is really well produced, and my favorite episode from 2019 was Pluralistic Ignorance. If there's anything that you take away from this podcast today, please, other than aphantasia, please write down Pluralistic Ignorance, because it is the psychology behind why we don't speak out or defend norms that we really don't like.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. And he does a great job of speaking to it and brings guests in to help understand it. And I thought that was just absolutely marvelous.
Well, I haven't listened to that. I'm going to have to go. Oh. That's on. I've listened to the show.
Yeah,
I have not listened to that.
In
episode.
fact, you were the one that told me about it, I think.
There you go. Well, I'm going to have to go out and I'm going to download that one and listen to it today.
Okay.
Or maybe tomorrow. Or maybe Sunday. I don't know. One of these days.
If and then or when.
Oh, I need to do it. So when I go ski instructing on Sunday on the bus with all of the teenagers and little kids.
Oh, my God.
I will just put on the podcast in my head, and I will listen, and then I will be in bliss, as opposed to like, oh my God, stop being teenagers on a bus. All right. Another one that we both love from a podcast perspective, Hidden Brain.
Yeah, Shankar Vedantam.
Shankar Vedantam, right? And the episode I'm going to push is Facts Aren't Enough. And again,
that was a great one.
It is. He's talking about confirmation bias and how data doesn't change our results. He brought in some guests, Holly Sharot and Kaylin O'Connor. and they talked about at the beginning, it was this really interesting piece about how, back in 18 whatever, there was this woman, and I can't remember her name now, went to Turkey and found out about smallpox variolation that they were doing there, and realized, wow, this really can help in preventing massive outbreaks of smallpox.
And she was a woman of society. She was obviously bright and had a lot of dough and was well respected in social circles.
And she brought it back to England, and it was like
a bomb.
Yeah, I mean, doctors didn't listen to her. Nobody listened to her. She was kind of outcast almost from it. And
she was a woman.
She was a woman, and the doctors had their own idea of how smallpox, to treat it and to prevent it, and that didn't jive with what she was saying. So again, it was motivated reasoning and various different pieces.
It's a
great episode, and again, those are just great episodes in general, but that one in particular. So
Behave is
Ogilvy's podcast.
Yeah, and
do they speak with an English accent?
Well, they do, because they're all English. So
oh yes, well there you go.
They're all British, so it's pretty great. But the episode that I want to call attention to in the Behave podcast is Dollars and Cents with Jeff Chrysler. Jeff Chrysler.
Who's that?
Oh, I know. It's like, and of course, Jeff is so fun, right? But to hear Rory and Jeff.
Oh my God.
It's like,
I haven't listened to it. I haven't thought about that.
And like, Rory is the first person that I've ever heard actually catch Jeff in sort of a moment of, I'm not sure what to say. It's pretty great.
Oh, the image in my head now of that. So that's the bus ride home on Sunday.
I hope so.
The bus ride there and the bus ride home. So Jeff is fantastic, and again, loved having him as a guest on our 100th episode, and that was fantastic. So all right, so that's 14, but I know you got a couple extra. I only had 7.
Well,
you came in. You over.
I'm classic overachiever.
Overachiever, man.
I wish. God. But there's just 2 others I want to just mention. Song Exploder, which is hosted by Rishikesh Hirway, and he does a great job of getting into the heads of songwriters about why they write. And my favorite episode from 2019 was Sheryl Crow, Redemption Day. So she talks about writing the song Redemption Day, and she's such an articulate person that her description of the things that she thought about and the way that she went through the production process and the writing and the rewriting was just excellent. So if you want to get inside the head of a songwriter, listen to Song Exploder and especially this Sheryl Crow Redemption Day.
All right, and the last one?
Radio Lab, which is hosted by Jad Abumrad and Robert Krulwich, and my favorite episode was Smarty Plants.
Plants, not pants.
Yeah, Smarty Plants. And it's about how plants have ears. Like they listen for water. And there's science behind this. Is not crap. There's good science behind it. So check that out if you want to just have your mind blown about trees. Yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that.
All right. Well, with that is our episode on our favorite podcasts from episodes from 2019.
Yeah.
And like I said before, we are looking forward to 2020, the year and the decade, and we hope you guys are as well. And so let us know what you think, and if you have any ideas for the program, or if you know Christopher Wiley or Jonathan Haidt or
Tally Sherrod.
Those are people we want to interview as well. So let us know and reach out, and we'd love to connect with you and touch with you.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.